Well, welcome everybody to Cabaret Conversations through the 92nd Street Y. I am your host for this evening and for the series, Michael Kirk Lane. This is our fifth in the series, and a couple rules for the road as we get started. As I said a moment ago, it is best for you to keep your cameras off until we get to the group discussion part at the end of the evening. That allows everyone to focus more on my guest and I as we move through. If there are some technical issues with some of the clips I share, don't worry. I will make sure that you get all of those via email later this week so that if you want to rewatch some clips or watch them at your leisure later, you will have that opportunity. As always, I want to thank Jana Stotland, the director of the 92nd Street Y School of Music, and everyone on her staff for making this possible as we move along. Tonight, for our fifth installment of Cabaret Conversations, I am thrilled to be joined by a woman who has been called a true force of nature and in a league of her own by Clive Davis of the Times UK. She has a Nightlife Award, 2 Bistro Awards, 12 Mac Awards, is the recipient of both the Donald Smith and the Margaret Whiting Awards from the Mabel Mercer Foundation. Her albums, including the award-winning Human Heart, are available wherever music is sold. Please welcome to Cabaret Conversations, Natalie Douglas. Hi, Nat.
Hi,
How are
darling.
you?
How are you? I'm fine. It's good to see you.
It's so good to see you. I'm so happy that you agreed to be part of this series. And so early
I'm
on
so
in it,
happy.
I was so excited when you said yes. So
And I see all these people I know. Hi, everybody.
it's a great group tonight. As I saw the registration,
Yeah.
the roster, it got sent to me on Friday. And I was like, oh, this is going to be fascinating. Our conversation, but then also because of who's in the room, what the group discussion can be at the end tonight.
Yay.
So, are you ready to get started?
I am. Let's go.
All right, darling. How did Cabaret come into your life?
Oh, um, oh, I guess technically in New York, someone took me to see my very first cabaret show, my dear late friend Danny Brack. I think the first one I ever saw was Karen Mason at Don't
Oh,
Tell Mama. And then the
that's a good
second one,
intro.
I think, right? The second one was Sydney Meyer at what is now the Triad, but I think it was Steve
McGraw's maybe
McGraw's
still then,
then.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And but before that, I mean, my parents used to take me to see live music all year round, like in LA growing up. So I always, I mean, my earliest memory of it was seeing the Count Basie Orchestra, which we did every year. Um,
Nice.
and when I was like four-ish, I want to say, um, it was Count Basie Orchestra, first act. Um, and it was spectacular and amazing, and everyone was up and dancing. I got to wear my first long formal, so I was very
Oh,
excited.
nice.
And yeah, I've loved a gown ever since I was wee. And I think second act was this. Yes, top of the second act was Joe Williams on stage in front of the curtain singing the verse to Something to Live For. And then as the chorus began, like the curtain lifted and then the whole orchestra was there, and I fell in love. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, this is okay, I need to be doing this for the rest of my life. Like this is, yeah. So I mean, that was concert, not cabaret, um but it felt, I mean, I think cabaret is, the connection that the performer makes with the audience. So it
Yes.
kind of doesn't matter how large the venue, or large or small,
Mm-hmm.
if that connection is completed, if the circuit completes, So I count that, and
Yeah,
that was when I knew I wanted to sing.
that moment you wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Did your parents respond to that and you so early on knowing that this is what you wanted to do forever?
No, because I didn't tell them. um, Secret. Well, no. I mean, I think I said like, "Mom, I want to do that," but I don't think she believed me. Um, and my mom taught me to sing actually
Oh,
when I
wow.
was four. in the kitchen, so I would stop bugging her while she tried to make dinner. Um, she told me I could go to my room and practice the song, and then if I came back, if I learned it, then I could sing for mom and dad at dinner, like, dinner show. So that's what I did.
Oh, I love
And
that.
yeah, and I made up a tag without even knowing what a tag was called. Um, yeah, weird. Um, You'll Never Know was the song.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and she just taught me to sing it. Like, she sang a little bit, I repeated it. She sang a little bit, I repeated it, and like on and on and on like that. And that's how I learned it. So I mean, I always sang. I always took voice. I played piano and harp, because I'm a super nerd.
But you didn't
Um,
study voice formally, right?
no, no.
Your academic path took a very
Uh,
different turn.
yeah, totally. Um, I don't. I mean, I think, well, ultimately, when I did finally tell them, they freaked. So I think I must have known that, and somehow intuitively known not to tell them that that's what I wanted. But I think my mother's thinking was, we'll send her to drama classes and drill team and Girl Scouts and language lessons and dance and all of that, thinking it would make me into a well-rounded
Very well
lady.
rounded. Well, and then when you
Um,
studied in college, it was psychology, theater, and women's studies, right?
yeah, I made up my own major when I was an
I
undergrad.
love that.
Um, yeah, I like a lot of things.
I'm going to pause for 1 second to ask our participants. I know a couple people came in late. It is best for the conversation if you keep your cameras off during the until we get to the group discussion section at the end. Um, so, Karen Mason, Sydney Meyer, amazing first experiences in New York cabaret.
Totally, totally.
Um, so, how do we go from seeing that your first cabaret show to moving into your first real solo show, which in 1989, correct? Broadway
Yeah.
Baby.
Yep. I worked at Broadway Baby. I
Okay.
was a waitress there, and that room, it was only one room. So the cabaret hour was like 7-ish or something,
Mm-hmm.
and then piano bar. So I waited tables for a lot of cabaret shows. I saw a lot of cabaret shows, um, and I don't know. So sometime, I think the first one I did was in spring of '89. So I'm gonna guess that sometime in like January or December or '88, um, somebody said, "Hey, when are you gonna do one of these?" You know, and I went, "Okay," and
I mean, but
booked a date, and then I did it.
working in the rooms can give you such a masterclass in what this art form can be, and also what this art form shouldn't be.
Right.
You and I have both spent time working in the rooms, and you see that
Yes.
huge range of performance.
And I mean, I think I learned a lot of my lessons in those days watching cabaret shows, also working piano bar, because I
Mm-hmm.
used to be so, I mean, obviously I talk a lot, but I used to be scared of talking on stage. And Charlie Lindbergh, who was one of the pianists I worked with back in the day, made me talk by refusing to play my song until I said at least 2 sentences before,
Love that.
so because I used to just run up on the stage and say hi and sing my 2 songs and then run back and wait
Mm-hmm.
tables. And he sort of forced me into it. And I think you learn a lot when you're doing it in front of live people. It's like
Yeah.
we can rehearse it, and hopefully we do, so we get it right. But you really, again, it's not a thing until that circuit completes, until there are people watching, actual people, and then some sort of alchemy takes place, and it becomes a different thing. And you have to learn that on your feet,
Yeah.
and fortunately, when I in 88, 89, I think my first ticket price was like $10 maybe. I mean, I think that was a going like beginner rate then. Um, it was me and piano, Steve Aquino, late lovely Steve Aquino. Um, I I think I had like a guest trumpet player who was just a friend of mine, like
Right.
another waiter. Um, it wasn't, I didn't have a big band. I didn't have I didn't have a lot of expense. I got to try doing it. I got to feel what it felt like. Um,
I
and
think
I learned a lot.
for me, the biggest gift as a cabaret performer was my years singing and slinging in the piano bar.
Mhm.
There's that, and you and I have talked about this before, that disconnect that can happen with some performers where they're not used to being themselves
Right.
and
Yeah.
connecting to a lyric or a piece of music as themselves, which, at least for me, working in the piano bar has forced me to get
Yeah.
used to that.
It absolutely does, because you're not anybody else, and obviously, if you're waiting on people or bartending all night, and then you walk up on stage and you put on this persona, you
Mm,
know, in order to do your number, so your crowd will know, and they'll wonder what's wrong with you,
yeah,
like,
because you've been
I mean,
interacting with them all night,
exactly. You've been
just
talking to
like
them all
this.
night. Right. And you walk up and become someone else. And a lot of people do that. A lot of people think cabaret means some kind of arch, archaic,
Mm-hmm.
1930s thing. And it's not. I mean, that cabaret that we have in our brains, that is that image, is from the 30s. And in the 30s, that was just people being
Right.
people. Um, and it really should. I'm a huge Nina Simone fan, and Nina always said, an artist must reflect the times in which they
Mm,
live. um, and so it does no one any good unless you're doing a period piece, which some people do, and they're
right.
brilliant and lovely. But it does no one any good for you to do some version of your idea of 1937 cabaret. Like,
Right.
what is that for? um so yeah, I mean, I want to know what's happening now. I want to know your connection to these songs now, like that world. So that's what I always try to do.
Well, I completely agree. It's that connection to the moment that we're in, the connection to yourself personally as a performer, and then the connection to the people in the room, in the intimate rooms that we often perform in. You've talked before, and I think it'd be great to move our conversation there, about the audience as your scene partner
Hmm. Yeah.
in cabaret.
I had yeah, one of my acting teachers at USC, the brilliant Carol Olegario, whom I adore, said that uh when you're on stage alone with a monologue, which is what a song is, um, you're not alone. The audience is your scene partner. They just don't have any lines. And you react to them in the way you would with any other scene partner. And that changed my life, just in terms of being aware of the audience, even when you have fourth wall up,
Right.
even, but, and obviously in cabaret we don't, but, you know, um, being aware and interacting without ceding all control,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a line we walk. Like, if you turn it into a free for all, you know that anyone can say anything, and you start having conversations, individual conversations with people, which exclude the other people in the room who
Right.
can't hear exactly. If it becomes that, usually it's so chaotic that then your audience can't relax and enjoy themselves,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't feel secure, they don't feel safe. um, but you can't ignore them. They're people, and
And
they've come to see you.
and you're seeing them there.
Yeah, they're right here, right in this room, right now. And that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the other things I think I love so much about cabaret, that like theater, it is immediate. It is now. It's completely ephemeral. And even when we record it, um, that what we're recording is that moment, and we can't recreate that moment
Right.
ever again, because you won't have that exact collection of people in the room. Sometimes you don't have the same band, and you're not the same you were last week or the week before or 6 months ago when you did it, or in another town when you did it. So, that's one of the things I really love about it.
It is, every show becomes its own living, breathing entity. Like you said, when you come back to a show 6 months later or 3 months later, which is often how people do now in our world, that the world's in a different place. So it's going to affect how you present your material.
Yeah. And even in when I go to London, I usually do a run 3 to 5 nights in a row. And even the very next night, it's different, and yes, the audience has obviously changed, but I haven't necessarily changed all that much in 24 hours, but I am different. I'm just, different things may have happened during the day that day. There may be new and exciting developments in the news. So I'm so exhausted. It all shifts slightly, and then it informs, even if you don't intend for it to, depending on the material that you're singing, it will come out differently. You'll react to it differently. It'll feel different to you. When I did we recorded the Radio Free Birdland show that aired in August. We recorded that the last day of June, no, July 30th, which happened to be Rep. John Lewis's funeral. So I've been watching that and, on my way to Birdland, and we had put the show together and figured out what it was going to be. And I got into the middle of it, and, on the set list was Mississippi Goddamn, which felt so different. And it was the first time I was singing it since June, since the end of May, George Floyd's murder, and everything that happened through the month of June and July. So, suddenly it resonated in this deeper way. And, I've gone deep with that song. But there was something immediate about it. And that was, a taping with me and Brian and, technicians at Birdland in the room. There wasn't an audience in the room, but that moment was different. And I knew the audience was there on the other side of the camera.
I do think that visceral moment translated through the screen in that performance.
Oh, I hope so. I mean, I really tried hard to make sure it felt like you were with me. If you were watching it at home, that we were together, that we were having this moment, because in a way we are. It's like I'm here, but I'm with you, and then you're watching it later, and you're watching, So I tried to capture some of that. Obviously, we can't. Nothing is like live performance. Right. Nothing. But since we can't do that right now, I still want to keep making that connection. Because that's why I do this.
And making your art, because your soul needs that in this time as well. And I think that makes a great transition to our first clip.
Oh, okay, cool. I don't know what it is.
I know you don't know what it is. I did offer to let Natalie know which clips I had chosen.
No, you did, but I love surprises. Wait, I shouldn't say that out loud.
Well, this is one of my absolute favorite numbers you do.
Okay.
Like, we were singing in preschool. I mean, it's fabulous. I love that, So we put that together with another union anthem, if you will, also from our childhoods, yes. Now, I have done research, and apparently it says this only aired 60 times, this particular commercial. I cannot believe that, because I feel like I saw it every day between the ages of like 2 and 20, but Why not? Just 60 times, and somehow it still managed to infiltrate all our consciousnesses. I know. So, since I believe that to be true, since I know that you will all feel like singing along, and I encourage you to, okay? But as I said last time, we will not wait for you. So just keep going, okay? Just keep at it, and we'll all meet each other at the end. Okay, all right. Look for the union label when you are buying a coat, dress, or blouse. I love you. Remember somewhere the union sewing, our wages going to feed the kids and run the house. We work hard, but who's complaining? Thanks to the ILG, we're paying our way. So always look for the union label. It says we're able to make it in the USA. If I had a hammer, I'd hammer it more. I'd hammer even all over this land. I'd hammer out danger. I'd hammer out a warning. I'd hammer out love between my brothers and my sisters all over this land. If I had a bell, I'd ring it in the morning. I'd ring it in the evening all over this land. I'd ring out danger. I'd ring out a warning. Ring out love between my brothers and my sisters all over this land. If I had a song, I'd sing it in the morning. I'd sing it in the evening all over this land. I'd sing out danger. I'd sing out a warning. I'd sing out love between my brothers and my sisters all over this land. Well, I have a hammer, and I have a bell, and I have a song to sing all over this land. It's the hammer of justice, it's the bell of freedom, it's a song of love between my brothers and my sisters all over this land. If I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning, I'd hammer in the evening all over this land. I'd hammer out danger, I'd hammer out a warning, I'd hammer out love between my brothers and my sisters all over this land, over this
I love that number so much.
Too. That's a Mark Hartman arrangement.
Full disclosure, that is one of my most watched videos on YouTube. I mean, and I've said, there's times I know I've sent you messages going, I'm watching your video again. So,
Love that.
lady,
Now you do know that that was the night I broke my leg, right? That I was singing that with a broken leg.
I did not know that. Well, I think we need to hear that story.
Well, that was October of 2012, end of October, and I had done Freedom Songs. That's what that show is from. It's songs of various civil rights movements and labor movement and all that. And I'd done it in April, and we were doing it again pre-election. And that afternoon, when we got to Birdland for soundcheck, I was passing out the books to the musicians, and I just walked off the stage in the dark. just didn't see and
Oh.
walked right off. And I thought I had sprained both ankles because that's what it felt like. And I pointed and flexed my toes and thought, okay, nothing's broken. But I was in a lot of pain and I couldn't stand. So I did that sound check sitting on a chair. And my husband, who is the son of a basketball coach, wrapped both my ankles, like ran to the Dwayne Reed and got cold packs and
Oh.
wrapped my ankles. And they basically carried me to the dressing room. I put on my face in the dress, and I think somebody like let me borrow, like somebody, not borrow, but somebody gave me like half a Percocet or something. And then they carried me out, and I did that entire show sitting on a bar stool. And then when it was over, because it was packed, we were like sold to the rafters. And when it was over, I went to the bar area at Birdland, as one does, the Gift Pagoda, and sold CDs. And then I went to the emergency room. And it wasn't until I got to the
Priorities.
emergency room, right, that when they did the x-ray, that they told me that I had actually broken one of my legs. It was my left leg, I think.
Oh.
Was it left, right? I can't remember now. Yeah. And I was kind of like, wait, what? And the doctor had said that, thank God you just pointed and flexed, because if you had tried to like wiggle your ankle side to side, you'd be having surgery right now. And I was just like, oh, okay. So, and that was the night of one of the debates, Mitt Romney and President Obama. So we watched it in the emergency room. It was so surreal. That entire night was just insane. And P.S., we live on a 4th floor walk up. So when we got home, which was like 5 a.m. by the time, I had to scoot up all the flights on my butt in my gown. Yeah, it was beautiful. It was a beautiful night.
Oh, that story is fantastic. And it's not like you haven't performed on that exact stage hundreds of times.
I know, hundreds of times. It was dark, and I, misjudged where it was, and I just tumbled. Yeah.
How did your residency at Birdland begin?
How did it be? I think Jim and I had been talking about, doing something different, because up until that point I have done, and I will say, Jim Caruso and Johnny Valenti just have always been incredibly generous with me and incredibly kind and supportive. So,
you have the honor of your portrait is on the Wall of Fame.
I know, and I wept like a baby. Yeah, I've been doing shows there, and it's about 80 shows there now since August 04. And I, sort of whenever I had an idea for a show, I could go to Jim, and depending on the calendar, he'd book me something. So I was doing like 2 and 3 shows, sometimes 4 shows a year there. And a couple of times we did, I remember 5 years ago, we did the same show once a month for 4 or 5 months, the Dolly Show. And we'd done a couple of other different, like 1 years ago when I did my gospel show, we did that Sundays and Mondays for a couple of, I think a couple of months. We did 1 Sunday, 1 Monday. We'd done like some different permutations of more opportunities, to perform and to do the shows. But we were just talking about, other ways to do this, other possibilities. And I asked if it was possible, and they loved the idea. And it was actually my husband's idea to do a different show every month.
And how long has the different tribute show every month been happening?
Wait, the first one we did was summer of 2017.
Okay.
And I did 4 months. Yeah, I did 4 different shows that year. And then in 2018, we did 6 months. And 2019, we did 10 months. And this year, it would have been 10 or 11, I think, that we had booked. Yeah. But we actually only did the January show, my birthday show.
Because you were on tour in California when
Mhm.
everything shut down.
Yep.
Was it
Yep.
LA or San Francisco you were in performing?
All of the above.
Okay.
We did San Diego, Palm Springs, LA, and then there were a few days off, and I was going to make my debut at Arenda, California, which is just outside San Francisco. And so we got the first 3 done. The last show was March 8th, the Joni show in LA at Pine Sunset Vitello's. And that was when we really saw the impact of, the quick, the multiplying diagnoses, because actually the first show in San Diego, they had just announced I think the show, maybe it was at 8:00, and at 7:00, 6:00 on the news, they announced that 2 or 3 different, I think it was AT&T stores, had just been closed because a couple of their employees tested positive for COVID. So there was this sudden, San Diego was, scared. So we had some cancellations in San Diego, but not everybody, And then Palm Springs was totally sold out. They brought in chairs and tables. And then LA, which was 2 nights later instead of the next night. That was, not a ghost town. I think we had 25, 30 people. It was, and they were all lovely, and I was happy to sing for them. But yeah, it was, cancellation.
Yeah.
Galore. But we went up to San Diego anyway, because at that point we really didn't quite know, because I think at that point, San Francisco had said, no gatherings over 200 people, and this theater is 190, so I think that's right, or it was 302, I don't remember. So we, the theater was just under the threshold, and we thought, okay, well, maybe that'll be okay. But then, as over the, I think it was 4 days between the 2 events, and more information was available, it became really clear that it was just dangerous. And as I said to my dear friend, Michael Williams, whom I adore, who's one of the producers out there, and it's not worth it to endanger anyone else. Even if I'm not worrying about me, I don't want anybody else to get sick because they came to an evening with me. That's just crazy.
Yeah,
so,
of course.
Yeah, so we postponed, and then we actually flew back a couple days early, because at that point, it wasn't clear if they were going to shut the airports down, So we left. We flew back to town on that Saturday, the 14th or the 15th, I think.
It's the 14th. Yep.
14th, yeah, and
that's the last day I went into the Beachman to gather some things before I knew we were going to be closed.
Yeah, and then everything was, Monday was, we were closed down. So so it was weird. And I was in rehearsal for the Rosemary Clooney show, which was supposed to be a week later, and it was insane.
Let's move to a happier topic.
Yes.
Who are, both when you were starting out in the cabaret world and then performers now, that you admire or inspired you in the cabaret world?
Ooh, okay. Interesting. Wow. Well, I honestly saw everything. I was really lucky that a lot of the people who became my regulars at Brandy's and at Broadway Baby, the 2 piano bars I worked in most, I worked in all the piano bars at one point. A lot of those people were maitre d's or managers in rooms, and so they got to know me, and they would occasionally, when something was lightly attended and they needed bodies, they'd ask me if I wanted to come see a show. So I saw a lot of fantastic shows at Rainbow and Stars. I saw Rosie Clooney several times. I saw Julie Wilson. I saw Liliane Montevecchi. I saw Joe Williams, whom I adored. Um, and and this, same thing at the other rooms too. And I worked the other rooms. So sometimes I worked shows and got to know people that way. Um, but I don't, that's interesting. I don't know. I feel like I learned from everybody. I stole from everyone. What we were talking about earlier, like when you watch a show, you learn what you think works and what you think doesn't. Obviously, it's a matter of taste, but and so I felt like everybody good. Karen Mason. I adore Julie Wilson. I followed her, anywhere and everywhere. And God,
Miss Wilson was the
such a love
best.
book. She was just, she was just so loving too, incredible, amazing. And I also went to the very
Julie's
first.
connection to a lyric.
Yeah, I know.
She could break you with a phrase, and oh.
Yeah. God, yeah. And one of my friends that I grew up with in LA, who had also moved to New York, we saved our pennies in 1988 and went to see Bobby Short at the Carlyle. We sat at the bar,
Wow.
which I think in those days, I think the bar ticket was $15, I think. But the drinks were also $15.
Yeah.
So I remember like it was a big deal that we had gotten, that we were gonna spend all this money on this one night, this one, but worth it. Worth it. And God, and I went to the first Cabaret convention in '89. I went and sat in the front row with my dear friend John DiCarlo, who is no longer with us, but God, he was just so much fun. He was my best friend for a long time. And we just ate it up, because it was everyone.
Yeah.
And that's, I went to the ballroom. I saw Helen Schneider. I tried to see as much as humanly possible. I saw Nancy Wilson every time she was anywhere near, because she had always been one of my favorites. And I grew up in the neighborhood she lived in a long time ago. I feel like I learned from Lena Horne's Broadway show. But I've always been this creature who loved music, loved people singing. I was the little weirdo with my cassette recorder holding my microphone to my TV, the speaker, so that I could record whatever variety show was on. I found a whole box of cassettes that are not labeled, and I have a feeling when I dive into them and figure out which is worth saving and what's not, and what, I'm sure I will find entire shows of the Mike Douglas show.
Oh, what a treasure trove.
I stayed home from school and recorded it. Like, I think I really feel like I watched so many people with an eye to, oh, that's interesting. I want to do that. How do I do that? Okay. Every time Abby Lincoln was anywhere in the tri-state area, I saw Abby Lincoln. I tried to see everyone all the time. And then, I was lucky enough to get to be friends with some really brilliant people. And so, I got to know Mark Nadler and Katie Sullivan and Jeff Harner, and 88's was this like fertile ground for meeting lovely people. And and one of the things I like about Cabaret is we're also different from one another, I loved Baby Jane Dexter. I thought Baby Jane was a hoot and a half. And God, nobody made me laugh harder. Not always intentionally. Oh my God, she was just so funny. I love that woman. You know, and I always felt like inspired after seeing her, but what she did wasn't anything like what I do,
Right.
you know. And God, in the late 80s, early 90s, I spent a lot of time in that showroom at 88's, not just when I was doing a show. I remember a night seeing Jim Caruso with his group, the Wise Guys, you know, and we knew each other then. We were friends then, but you know, I went to see the show not because he was my friend, but because it was like, oh, I've heard about these guys. I want to see what they do, you know. And Montgomery, Plant, and Stretch, you know.
What brings you, because you still see a lot, what brings you into the rooms now? Like, what's the thing that makes you go, I want to see that new performer that I've heard about? Or
usually, I mean, honestly, I wish I could see more than I do, just because of how like crazy life is, and how, you know, I used to be traveling a lot. So I wasn't here for a lot of, I feel like I miss a lot of things that you know, I'm always looking at the emails, and, you know, because I'm on a bunch of newsletters and a bunch of mailing lists, and I see things and I'm like, I'm not going to be there for that. But I'm sort of curious about all kinds of things, you know, because I love all kinds of music. There's nothing that I'm sort of, you know, oh, well, that's not true. Okay. The only thing that I'm sort of, I have the area of music I have the least interest in, let's put it that way.
Lovely way to word it.
Yes, is a sort of 50s, 60s doo-wop-y sound.
Okay.
You know, like that just doesn't, that, you know, I was cast once in a Leader of the Pack, and I was kind of like, you know? It's not that I don't think the songs are brilliant. I totally get that they are, but it just doesn't speak to me.
If it doesn't speak to your soul,
You know?
then it's not going to be what you sing.
Right. But it's not like, so it's like, I don't mind listening to it. I just am not that interested in singing it myself, you know? So that, but everything else I kind of dig. You know, my jam is like 70s Southern California pop, rock, country, folk, that hybrid, because that's the music of my childhood.
I think that brings us to our next clip.
Oh, really? Oh,
I think
okay.
it does. I think it gave me a great segue into a clip I've got.
Okay.
Where is it? 1 second. There it is. Some of the clips are on top of each other on my desktop, so it takes a second.
Mm-hmm. I understand.
Always been rebellious. Because I don't think it's just because I'm a singer, but people often ask me, what's my favorite song? And that's impossible, because it's the song you're working on right now. It's the song that's going through, the song you woke up that was in your head this morning. You know, it's always different for me. But if you had asked me that question when I was about 6, it was this. Sunshine, go away today. Don't feel much like dancing. Some man's come, he's tried to run my life. Don't know what he's asking. He tells me I better get in line. Can't hear what he's saying. When I grow up, I'm gonna make it mine. These ain't dues I've been paying. How much does it cost? I'll buy it. The time is all we've lost. I'll try it. And he can't even run his own life. Be damned if he'll run mine. Sunshine, sunshine, go away today. I don't feel much like dancing. Some man's come, he's tried to run my life. Don't know what he's asking. Working starts to make me wonder where the fruits of what I do are going. He says in love and war all is fair. He's got cards he ain't showing.
Well, you've led the conversation right to a perfect spot to play it. And I said to Natalie earlier today for our participants, I had chosen 8 clips, knowing we would probably only get to see 3 of them in our time together. So all of the others that I chose that we aren't going to see, I will send you in a playlist so you can see the other things I had chosen.
Goody, I love to know that.
So Nat, what in your 30-some years in the world of cabaret do you think are the biggest changes you've noticed in the art
Oh
form?
boy. Well, obviously, there are fewer rooms than there were in 1988. And it is a much more expensive proposition. Even people who are doing their first shows ever, I notice, hire a band, and a music director, obviously, but a director. Sometimes they spend money on PR. Like, we never used to spend money on that stuff when we were beginning. It was, your postcards and your MD, and that was sort of, at least for me, that was, and it allowed me to make a smaller investment as I was learning.
Mm-hmm.
And now it seems like people are not just making a huge investment of cash, but also of time, because, we used to do runs. I mean, at 88, I did something crazy. Like, I did the late show on Fridays in the 92-ish area, and 93, something like that. And I did that, I think, for almost a year. 11 o'clock Friday night.
And that slot really doesn't even exist anymore at most of the clubs.
Right, yeah. And it was, and we would usually book it, a month or 2 months at a time. So that was what was on your, your flyer. And that gave you a chance to really live in a show for a while and get used to different audiences responding to different things, and have that. The rooms don't book that way now. The
financial model's completely changed.
Yeah, completely different. And so, so that is different. I also think people, there have always only been a few of us who do this as our living, who do this like this is my job. But I think there are even more people now who do this because they love it. It's not their job, but because they're not trying to make a living, they're not having to pay rent. They sometimes, when I work with students, I find sometimes that they have a show that becomes so precious to them because they hold on to it, and they rehearse it and rework it without ever putting it in front of an audience for a year. And then sometimes when they do put it in front of an audience, there's so much writing on it for them, that the pressure that they put on themselves is just, it breaks my heart, because ideally, even when it's your job, or if it's not your job, it's supposed to be fun,
Yeah.
So, that feels really different. I threw up shows sometimes, in the old days, just because I had a booking, and it was kind of like, oh, well, okay, well, what do I want to do? And figuring it out in 3 weeks, putting it up. And it wasn't that I didn't care, or that I thought it was, or that I was cavalier about it. It's just that because I wasn't waiting to do it, because there was more space. There were more spaces, literally, and there was more space on the calendar. I could try something and see, do I like that? Is that fun? Does it feel right for me? And now I think it's harder to do that. I don't envy anybody starting now, because I think it's just a lot harder to find the space to do that, to find the room.
And find the audience.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. That was the other thing. I mean, because I worked in piano bar, my very first show, I've been working about a year and a few months by the time I did my first show. So I had begun to build a mailing list, which was a literal mailing list because I would mail a postcard to your house back in the day. The olden days. Um, and, um, and, you know, I had like the steady stream of new people
Mm-hmm.
coming into the bar, people I'd never met before. And if they said, "Oh, I like you," and start talking, I'd say, "Well, do you want to give me your address? I'll put you on my," Um, so that now I don't know how you find a mailing list, like how you build that.
I know I'm
Um,
lucky that I've worked in the clubs. And so, like you, I've built an audience
yeah,
from my days singing and slinging at Mama's or from my days at the door at the
Mhm.
Beachman.
yeah,
And people don't get that opportunity so much anymore.
yeah. It's and you're. I mean, it's wonderful when your friends and family come to see you, and God bless every one of them. Um, but they can't. If that is your only audience, then it can't be a living for you
You've
because
talked about
they
this
just
transition. It's from
yeah.
singing for friends and family to being a performer who sings and makes their money singing for strangers.
Yeah, it's different,
Mm-hmm.
and ideally by the time the show's over they feel like friends,
Right.
um, and and hopefully they feel that way too. That's your job, but it is different. There's so many shows I have seen of people who are used to singing for friends and family, or they're singing for friends and family, but they have some people who've come to see them for the first time for whatever reason. They know them from a class or they saw a flyer or whatever, and they don't know them very well. And if your show is too inside, if all of your jokes, I have to know you since you were 4 to get, then you're actually alienating people
Mm-hmm.
when what you want to be doing, is drawing them in. And I always think of it as my job to make sure people have a good enough time that they will want to come back.
Yeah.
Or that if someone says, "Oh, you saw that Natalie Douglas show, you saw the Shirley Bassey show, how was that?" That someone would have happy things to say, you
Mm-hmm.
know, that they can recommend. They could say, "Oh yeah, you should go see her. I don't know if she's doing that show, but next month she's doing the Nancy Wilson show, and that's um, though I'm aware that I am not everyone's cup of tea.
Well, I mean, no one
Somebody,
is.
yeah, exactly. But someone was very, very sweet to me a few months and months ago, obviously, introducing me on a bill of, a whole bunch of us, what the great Christine Petty taught me to call a park and bark.
Mm-hmm.
And referred to me as beloved, and I just laughed out loud because I was like, I'm lucky. I love a lot of people, and God bless a lot of people are kind enough to love me. But I know the people who don't.
One of my college professors would always end a class or a scenic strike, and it stuck with me for this reason. And his exit line would be, "Love most of you," and he'd
That's
go.
awesome. That's awesome. Oh, I love that. Oh,
Um,
that's great.
So
Yeah.
now I can't have you on the series and not have us talk about where we are as a world, but also in the cabaret community.
Hmm.
And you and I have had some of these conversations, but
Yeah.
um, it would be a disservice to my audience to not have this conversation. So I hope you're
Mhm.
willing to have it.
Oh,
Uh,
sure.
you've been interviewed for 2 articles about it. I was interviewed for a follow-up for one of them as
Uh-huh.
a club manager. Cabaret's too white.
Yes, it is. And it has been for a long time.
Yeah.
I think um I think it is a thing that got worse. And by worse I mean whiter, you know. Um as the model changed, as cabaret became less viable a play, as clubs
Mm-hmm.
became a less viable place to make a living, as it became something people did in addition to, extra. um, I think it got whiter, you know. Um, and I I also think that we made a mistake as a society. In the 70s, I remember watching television, and the One Day at a Time, whom I loved, Barbara and Julie, and wanted to be just like them when I grew up. And I would watch them. They were cool kids. And when they had a party at the apartment with Anne Romano, there were always different colored kids in that group. That the Brady Bunch, like all the TV that we saw was integrated. And I think the lesson we learned was, oh, that's what it's like, so we don't have to think about it. And in fact, there were people thinking about it. Norman Lear, there were people who were making specific choices, looking at casting, but we didn't see that part of it. We only saw the result. So we grew up thinking, okay, so I don't have to think about this, it just happens. And then when we got to be the ones in charge, when we got to be the ones sitting on the other side of the table, sitting in the casting offices, making the decisions, we weren't thinking about it. And when we don't think about it, the default for this entire nation is white. That's what we have. It's what a white supremacist society creates. So it's what happens when left to its own devices, because that's the engine that drives our nation. So you have to purposefully interject. You have to think. And I think a lot of really wonderful, like not evil, but a lot of great white people think if they think about race, then that's racist. That in and of itself. If they look at a casting roster or a review and say, oh, wait, I don't have any Black people here. Oh, wait, there are no Asian people here. That is racist. So they don't want to think about it. So they just, call 15 friends to do this review. And when I, or, somebody else sends the private message or makes the phone call and says, honey, I just got your email. Why is your night all white? They are shocked and usually surprised because they hadn't thought about it, which is the definition of white privilege, that you don't have to think about it, And sometimes, depending on the person, sometimes they're defensive because they feel like I'm saying you're racist, when what I'm saying is we're all racist. Welcome to America. It's racist. So we have to actively work not to be. And, as I think I've said in a bunch of these interviews that I've done on this subject, because, this subject has been part of my work for 30 years. I've always talked about being Black on stage. And there are people who don't like that. There are people who asked me point blank why I had to do that. And why my show wasn't just me singing songs. Your voice is so beautiful. Why can't you just, and I'm like, well, it's not a secret that I'm Black. So
those people would never ask me why I'm talking about being gay in a show.
Exactly. So, it's been a part of my life to talk about change and to work for change and to work for equality. And as I say, there are people who think the pendulum is swinging back the other way too far. I've had that conversation in the last month or so. And I disagree, because what Justice Ginsburg said about the Supreme Court, it will be equitable when there are 9 female justices.
Right.
Like it's, we have such a long history of inequality, of injustice, that it will balance when it doesn't raise anybody's eyebrow for an entire cast of something to be non-white. And that's not the point of the piece.
Right.
That's not what we're doing. We're not exploring that. It's just, that's who we cast. We cast an entire, a theater piece or a review or a television show or a film. My husband and I were talking about this when Chadwick Boseman died so suddenly, and you know, it was heartbreaking. And that, I guess it was a couple nights later, when ABC aired, you know, Black Panther unedited.
Yeah, they changed the programming for the night.
Without commercial break. That's
Mhm.
what I'm trying to say. So we watched it again, and I remember the opening weekend going to see that film in a theater, and just being so overjoyed seeing all these kids come dressed up, you know, just and some older people too, you know, just all these beautiful Black people just celebrating being Black. And then in that film, when the scene of the sort of coronation, the, you know, moment he becomes king, when the camera pans to all of these Black people standing on the side of a cliff, and there's nothing but Black people on the screen, in gorgeous costumes, colorful costumes, and I just wept. I mean, it was just this moment of like, wow, there we are. Well, we're being people need to recognize themselves. People need to see themselves. It is good for the soul. What we require children of color in this country to do is to look at superheroes and TV shows and singers and say to themselves, okay, well, I can imagine that I could do that, even though I can't see me do that. I can't see somebody who looks like me do that. So we require them to work so much harder, which is the definition of inequality. Like, that is the problem. In every situation, if you are non-white, you work harder. Intellectually, emotionally, sometimes it's a matter of safety, you know, which, you know, my brothers and sisters and non-binary siblings in the LGBTQ community can relate to too. It's like sometimes the work that you do is just going to the supermarket or going to the laundromat or whatever, and suddenly you have to be aware, like, is this a safe place for me right now? Am I, you know, and if it isn't, what are my options? Where can I go? Who looks like they might help me? Is there someplace else I could be that is safer? Like, and you have to look at the world that way, you know, to be content to add work to us just seems like the height of unkindness and like hubris, you know. And in Cabaret, I think it's a question. I mean, I was just talking to a singer I adore and a friend, and she was saying, you know, Natalie, you know, I care about this. What can I do? What can I personally do? Which, you know, first of all, make sure if you're asking that question, if you are asking a Black person that question, that person is actually your friend, and not just a Black person, you know, because we're already exhausted. Okay, but if that person is actually your friend and you share things, and you ask that question, one of the things you can do is do your own research, yes, but you know, I ask, and in her case, I knew, I'm like, sweetheart, I have seen how many of your shows. When have you ever had anybody on stage with you who wasn't white? What does your band look like? Every time. Don't get me wrong. There are brilliant white musicians that I have happily worked with in my life. But about 7 years ago, I decided I was never going to appear on stage with an all-white band, ever. When I'm the one doing the hiring. There's just no reason to. This is New York City. And since I am almost always talking about race in my shows, it comes up in, like, obviously, if I'm doing a Nina Simone tribute, it's going to come up. I can't be the only Black person on stage. That's ridiculous. That's insane. You know.
I read you saying the band thing in an article. I think it was Stephen Mosher's article. And that one hit me. It was an eye-opening thought.
And when you when I say that to friends, there's often oh, you're right. Well, I don't know enough. I don't know enough people of color who play the bass or whatever. And to that I say, A, you don't know enough people of color. B, so make that your business. Because if you had a date and you didn't have an MD for some reason, like, the person that you usually work with suddenly got another gig and couldn't, you would not rest until you find somebody to play that show. Because you're not going to show up without your pianist. You're just not, the show can't happen without. So if you make it that important, then you will not stop until you find, and the thing is, it's not that hard. There are so many brilliantly talented women who are instrumentalists. There are so many brilliantly talented Black people who are instrumentalists. There are so many brilliantly talented Latinx people who are instrumental. Like, it is not hard to find.
Right.
Just make it as much a part of your job as anything else you do. And that comes to everything else too. If you really want to make a difference, where do you spend your money? I mean, there's a great comedian whom I adore named Dulce Sloan. She is hysterical. She is also fierce. And to quote her, nothing changes until you fuck up a white man's money. And that is true. So if you want change, where are you spending your money? When was the last time you went to a Black-owned restaurant or store? Or if you are throwing an event, who's your florist? Who's your caterer? Don't just hire us to show up on stage and sing for you or to wait tables. We do lots of things, and if you make it your business, then ultimately what we want to get to is a place where it's not always only white people who are the gatekeepers. What we want to get to is a place where it's not always something that you give, where there are people making the decisions who look like me, who look like Erin Quill, who look like Morgan Lee, I mean, it's just, we've done this for so long and it clearly doesn't work. There are far too many people in pain and there are far too many of us dying. So let's do something else.
And I thank you for your place in our cabaret community, that you are someone of a certain respect, and we'll say beloved again. So you are someone who's been able to raise the issue in a way that I think people are taking more notice now.
Yeah, I think people are. And the thing is, look, I should say never, because there are a couple of people, but I am rarely pointing a finger at any one particular person, because this is a systemic problem. This is not, I mean, there exist some people who just hate people who look like X, or people who, those people exist and they're weird. But that is not the crux of the problem. The problem is in the foundation of our nation, so the work has to be overt and consistent. What I think I've said it in both those articles, is that if you are a Black person in this country, if you are a person of color in this country, you never get a day off. You think about it every day. So if it's going to change, people who are not in that category have to think about it every day, all the time. That's how it changes. And yes, since you don't have to, you're taking on something that isn't altogether pleasant, but it's
That's
the
how
only
we
way
make change.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you for all of that.
This morning, oh sure, when I got up this morning and I saw the Supreme Court news from Justices Alito and Thomas,
Yeah.
What I thought was, how dare you? As we have worked so hard in this country, I think, to make progress. Obviously, we haven't done everything we need to do. But one of the ways that you see that is that, I grew up with my mom talking about a sort of a play uncle and his husband when I was little. But my mom explained to me, they're two men, but they're married like a man and a woman. Okay. And I was really little. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, I get to decide. Awesome. But also like, yes, it is okay. And that's how I grew up. So to get the country there took way too long, but we got there. And for them to want to drag us back because of their own prejudice, how dare you, evolve beyond your own personal BS. Like that's kind of the job of being a human being on the planet.
Yeah. Which is why I'm glad I chose the last clip that I chose for you. But I have to ask one more question first, because then we're going to do the clip, and then we're going to move into the group discussion where everybody can turn their cameras on. But I always end with this. In a couple of sentences, what is cabaret?
Oh, God. Okay.
And it almost always gets that reaction.
Yes, because it's not easy to do. Okay. Cabaret is both a venue. It's a definition of the places in which we do this thing. And also, it is the act of singing, although it isn't always singing, the act of creating an act, a show, that is intimate and connects the performer with the audience. That, it becomes a conversation. It becomes this relationship. And I know that's true of all the performing arts, and even some visual arts too, because it's not, a painting isn't really done until people see it. That's the completion of the act. But I think in cabaret, it's what we're aiming at. Like that's the main reason we're doing this. I always say when I'm teaching students, that people think of us as show-offs, performers. And that's true. Otherwise, why would we do this? But also, I think what we seek is connection. I think people who go into the performing arts want to connect with an audience, with something bigger than themselves. Like, so much of our work has historical implications and connotations and, derivations. And with other performers, when you're on stage making music with musicians you adore, singing songs you love, that's
It's the best.
It's heaven. So I think cabaret is about creating art that forms that connection.
Well, here's our final clip before we move into
Amen. The
Oh, Natalie, thank you so much for this conversation today and for joining me on this series. I am going to invite anybody who's watching who wants to turn their cameras on. You can do that now. I'm going to switch to gallery view for myself. We can have a little bit of group discussion. If anyone has a question, you can either turn your camera on and raise your hand, or you can type it in the chat.
Michael.
I'm Michael. How are you? I know we've got, there we are. Bob Diamond, welcome. Oh,
Hey,
Leslie Carrera
Leslie.
Rudolph.
Look at all these beautiful people.
We had it was really a great group today. Does anybody have a comment or a question? You can unmute yourself and kind of raise your hand if you'd like.
I'm just really grateful that you have these, Michael, and getting to see a deeper layer of Natalie. And thank you for all that you shared. It really is. It's an inspiring gift. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sweetheart. I enjoy you. You're delightful.
I'm always amazed at how you memorize those whole shows for me.
Well, Michael, you have seen a lot of shows, Michael. God bless you. Thank you so much for coming. And you know that I don't always memorize well. You've been there for a few of those moments. Whew,
well, that's
Lord.
a good question. Nat, do you have any tricks you go to when you're putting a new show up to get it in your brain?
I'm real old school. Yeah, I'm super old school. I mean, I listen to the song a zillion times, but I write it out longhand, over and over and over. Because the thing, there's that weird place that's kind of. I used to have like almost photographic memory, so I could remember like chunks of things. But the thing is, what you have to do when you're singing, as everybody here knows, it is be fully present in what you're singing right now, but have the next chunk ready to go. It has to come. Because most songs don't give us the time to like finish this idea and then right, and then that moment of what comes next. And when you do something a million times, you get to that place where you have some muscle memory, and so you when it comes next, it just comes. But in that weird, like the song's kind of new but it area, that's where I get tripped up, because I sort of know it, but my mouth doesn't know what to do next. So I'm like, but if you ask me to recite the lyrics, I could. It's about like the rhythm and the music, and it's getting all those things working.
All of our music directors know that look of dread as it goes, what is next?
No, in Mark Hartman's case, no, he God bless him. God, he just sort of listens, because God knows what I'm going to do. God knows how much of the arrangement I'm going to remember. The first time we do a show, oh my God. So he's just like, he's magic. And he's just there like, okay.
And you two have been a team for years.
Yeah. Oh gosh, what is it now? 23. Yeah, 23 years.
This is Natalie's musical director, Mark Hartman, for those of you who don't know. Brilliant music director and pianist in the city, although he's in North Carolina right now, I believe.
He is, yeah. The last couple of projects I've been doing with my other best friend, Brian Nash,
who's also brilliant.
And oh God, he is. Yes, he is, absolutely. And again, knows me so well and listens and knows like, oh, she's skipping that verse. Okay. God bless them. Like, oh, we're going back today. Okay. It's just evil.
The joy of live performing.
Oh my God, yeah. It's sometimes when I get the video, the fun. I mean, I enjoy, like half enjoy watching myself, half don't. But like one of the fun things for me is watching Mark or Brian, sometimes John Weber or Billy Stretch, like whomever, like because I have suddenly changed the arrangement, like communicate that to the other musicians on stage, like while they're singing and still playing, and Oh God, I'm so sorry.
The arms flying with signals for pages and
Like,
measure numbers. Yes.
Yeah. 14, 14. Like just makes me
Uh,
so happy.
any other questions
Oh,
or
yeah.
thoughts from those who are with us? I know we had a couple people who had to duck out a little early as
worries.
well today.
I'm just happy to see you. Hi, Bob.
It's so great to see both of you. And I learned a lot today, Natalie, from you. Uh,
Oh, well, thank you. That's
well, listening to you sing is one thing, but now hearing all of this has sort of brought out a lot more of why I love you and what's important
back at you.
in our life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, what's important is, why we do this. It's what's important is love and making that connection with other people and recognizing all the things that we share, and the things that we don't um, actually make us richer. Like when we find those things out, as opposed to pretending that we're all exactly the same, or pretending that the only people who count are the people who are the same. That's some bull. The truth is, we're all unique and we all have stories, and everybody's story is fascinating. Okay. Almost everybody's story is
And that's why I chose Human Heart as the song you do to end us on tonight.
No.
Thank you. Well, I'm so glad you did. That always gets to me, because I saw Once on This Island when it was on Broadway the first time. And at that point in my life, I did not know I was adopted. And then I saw it again when in 2002, I think it was, when they had the big Broadway Cares Actors Fund concert version of it I think it was at the Winter Garden, like on an afternoon. And I was there with Phil Jeffrey Bond and like Christy Cates, a whole, and Mark Hartman sitting next to me. And I had found out that I was adopted then, but I wasn't thinking about that when we went into the theater to see it. And when the show began, and it's the story of this little girl who was adopted by these older people, just like I was I think people around me were nervous. I was crying like a crazy person. And so that show now means so much more to me. We saw the most recent revival, which was, I have always loved that show. And that score, it is spectacular. But like now it's this little piece of my heart, so thank you so much.
Would you be all right, Natalie, since you brought it up, if I shared the San Francisco Chronicle article when I send the playlist out?
Totally.
It's the story of Natalie finding her birth father. And I'll share that article with all of you. It's really a wonderful article. I was reading it again this afternoon. Well,
I just talked to him yesterday, day before, whatever.
We are at our ending time. So if no one else has any other thoughts or questions, I will say before we leave, the next Cabaret Conversations is November 16th with Cheetah Rivera. So you can sign up for that now. And my Cabaret History and Great Performances class starts not next Monday, but the Monday after, for 4 Mondays, where we chunk up by decade and go through the history of this world we call cabaret. So registrations for both of those are available on the 92nd Street Y website, and I will include them both in the email. Natalie, do you have anything coming up?
Oh, do I? I don't. Well, I'm doing a talk tomorrow with Jim Masters. I'm getting to do his interview show. So if you're not sick of listening to me talk, and really, how could you be? My husband is about to, that's tomorrow. I think, I don't know. It'll be on. I'll put it on the Facebook page. I don't remember. And at the end of the month, I'm getting to do a sit down with Richard Skipper.
Oh, lovely.
Okay.
Fun. And What else? I'm doing a bunch of I'm doing a Chicago Humanities Festival. I recorded a concert for them because all of it is online this year. You know, we were supposed to actually go to Chicago and do it there.
And you're part of the Cabaret Convention, the virtual Cabaret Convention.
Yes, Cabaret Convention, the virtual on Monday and then again on the Thursday. You know, stuff.
I'll include your website in
I'm
the
also
email.
doing I'm in the Lilith thing, the All That Lilith, which is a celebration of Lilith Fair, and it's very fun and downtown and weird, and like everybody's filming their own things and, you know, celebrating. So, and that's raising money for RAIN and Black Women's Collective. So that's Tuesday and Thursday.
Aren't you doing something with Michael Levine? Aren't you doing something with Michael Levine?
Yes, yes. I'm trying to learn my song. In this, you know, in this new world where we're like doing our own, like everybody has, you know, you all have TV studios in your house. I'm trying to teach myself like all the technical stuff, which I love because I'm a nerd about that stuff, but I'm also like learning material. So yes, Michael Levine is working on a great project, the songs of Arthur Siegel, and I found a song Michael gave me, but I have to learn it. And I'm also doing John Bacchino project because it's the 20th anniversary of Grateful. So he's doing a concert to celebrate that, which is amazing. But I have all this material to learn. So so mostly I'm at home learning music or, you know, running around in a mask to rehearsals.
Well, Natalie, once again, thank you so much for joining tonight.
I'm sorry. I don't want to, Jen Barnhart, I have to say, hey, Jen, she is responsible in some, because Jen brought up to Mark Hartman 9 years ago, said something to Mark about, it would be fun to sing backup for Natalie. So Mark and I came up with the idea of a show that we would do that.
Oh no, Natalie, you froze right in that.
But that show.
Natalie, start that over because we lost you for a minute of that.
Oh, did you? I'm sorry.
Yep,
hello.
You froze.
Are you here? Yeah. I was just saying thank you to Jen Barnhart because she's the one who kind of started Freedom Songs in the sense that she asked Mark Hartman if I would ever need a backup singer. Like, would I, you know, and Mark and I started thinking of a show we could do that would have backups and I came up with the Freedom Songs, which was this show about civil rights movements and women's rights and LGBTQ rights, and we created the show with a big backup group, and then Jen couldn't do it. She got cast in a show.
That the way?
But thank you to her for that cool idea, because it wound up being, I've done Freedom Songs now. You know, I did 2 of them in 2012, and then I did 2 of them in 2016, because they're connected, obviously, to politics and the election and whatever. And then I sank into a deep depression. And then I started doing it again last year. 2018. So I've done it a bunch of times, like, and it's, there's something cathartic about it. So thank you, Jen, for that.
Well, and thank you to you, Natalie, and for all of you who joined this evening. I thought this was fascinating, and I always enjoy sitting and talking with you. We just had an audience this time.
I know, but it's just like we're sitting at the Lori Beach.
At the back of the Beachman having one of our conversations.
Yes. I love you, Leslie.
Thank you, everybody. I will send the email with the playlist, with the link to Natalie's website, and the links to the other programs at 92nd Street Y, School of Music for Cabaret.
And everybody stay healthy, please.
Yes, stay healthy, wear your masks, be well. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.